Hello, hello, my beautiful creative friends. Welcome back to my little art studio, and a very happy new year to you all. I hope you've got something warm and comforting to drink and a few favorite art supplies nearby because today we're easing into 2026 together by spending a creative hour together. If you're new here, my name is Melanie and I am the artist behind the Swimming Owl, and I'm super happy to have you here. Today I'm unboxing and playing with some new art supplies from a company called Journal Say. And instead of one of my typical color alongs, I'll be experimenting in the new sketchbook I got and creating a few small watercolor paintings today with these new supplies. So first, let's take a look at what Journal Say sent. So the first thing I unboxed were these Kiritake Gansai paints. And just to be fully transparent, I've owned a set of these since 2017 and I knew that I liked them already, so I will be using these paints in a little bit for the paintings that I create. The next thing in here are these little brushes down in the bottom. These came as a full set like this. I didn't actually need this many, but I was hoping to experiment with these when I use my pan pastels for coloring pages. So that's why I got these, and I was very excited about that because I don't like the applicators that come with pan pastels, so I thought this would be interesting to try. Next up, I picked out this adorable watercolor sketchbook. I loved the strawberry pattern on it in that it has a really nice thick paper. It's very textured cold press paper. You can see that beautiful texture on there. That's the kind of paper that I prefer to work with. And then in the back of this sketchbook, it does have one of those little folders in the back if you want to store anything in there, like stickers or tickets or mementos, anything you want, you can tuck in there for when you're on the go. Next up, I picked out this really cute stamp, like a date stamp. I thought this would be perfect for when I create sketchbook pieces, so I can stamp in the day that it was created. Then I picked out some of these little like artist trading cards. I've never had any of these before. I thought this could be kind of fun as little warm-up paintings even. I also love that they're textured. You will see me paint a couple of these in a little bit. I picked out a couple of these pens. This is a journaling or scrapbooking company, so those are perfect for people that love to do planning and journaling. These were kind of like an acrylic marker almost, but metallics and whites. I got a ton of tapes. These are scissors that I picked out that I really love keeping a pair of really sharp scissors on my desk. I thought this would be super fun for both coloring and doing my moon shapes or stars, especially with those little brushes that I picked out with pan pastels. So that's gonna be my experiment later. And again, I got a bunch of these tapes. I thought these were like washi tape that I would be able to do my watercolors with. Turns out these are more like a packaging tape. So they had a sticky or a paper underneath that you peel off before putting it down. So these were not exactly washi tape, but now we know, don't we? They're super pretty though. So thank you to Journal Say for sending me all of these beautiful supplies and for collaborating with me on today's video. This is going to be a lot of fun to try everything out. If you see something that you would like, I have a link below that you can use to go shop along with a discount code, which hilariously is my husband's name for some reason. That's how they set the code up. I think they just used the name that they saw on a shipping label. So anyway, all of that information is down below. They also have a really cool New Year's sale going on right now, so you can get a ton of stuff for a very good price up until February 1st, 2026. So here you will see that I just swatched out all of the colors on this Gansai paint set. And then I started to open up this sketchbook because I thought I was just gonna jump in and start an actual painting right away inside this sketchbook. But little did I know I was going to get the creative yips, so to speak, where my brain shorted out and forgot how to paint for a little bit. So I decided to switch gears and I started working on one of these little watercolor papers instead. I guess these are called like ACEOs or like a little artist trading card. I've never done these before, so I thought this would be a low pressure way to get back into a creative practice after some time off and just put paint on paper. And I actually ended up needing to do a second one of these over 2 days before I actually got to my bigger painting in the sketchbook. Sometimes creativity do be like that. It just is hard to reach your flow state after a little bit of time off and getting back into it, and maybe even facing a little bit of like art block or just maybe some exhaustion thrown in there, who knows. So I just needed a couple of warm-ups and reminders that I do know how to do this and it is good for me. It makes my brain feel better, but I just needed those warm-ups and the practice again. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be using these Gansai paints mostly today for my paintings. These are traditional Japanese style water-based paints that come in these cute little pans that you can actually lift out of the box, and you could put them into like a custom palette if you wanted to. And these paints can dry a little bit glossy at times, which I've actually really enjoyed that effect as I've used these over the years. And the colors are often richer and less translucent than what you might be used to with your Western watercolors. Now, one small note I've recently learned is that there is some mixed information out there about these Gansai paints on whether or not they are vegan due to the type of glycerin in them. So if that is an important matter to you, I am going to encourage you to do your research and make the choice that feels right for you on whether these are the right paints for you. I am not here to debate it. I just want to share how I've enjoyed using them. The other point I want to make about these paints is I've seen some other chatter online about the proper way to use these paints. And if you've been around for a while, you guys know how I feel about rules and art supplies. All of these rules that people give us, they're all made up, okay? There are no wrong or right ways to use your supplies. I really only have one rule, I guess, and it's the only way to waste your art supplies is to not use them. So don't listen to people telling you if you're using something the right or wrong way. If you're using it and you're having a good time, forget the rest, okay? So the things I've seen about these paints are, one, they are supposedly pre-mixed and you don't need to mix them with other paints, or maybe you shouldn't, or blah, blah, blah. Well, guess what? For years, I have been mixing these Gansai paints with all of my other watercolors, and that's how I've always used them, because nobody ever told me in the beginning that's not how you're supposed to use them. So I just experimented, and I've been mixing them with my Daniel Smith and Art Philosophy Co. and all of my other paint brands, and having a heck of a time and loving it. So if you've read or seen that before, feel free to throw that advice out the window. The other advice I saw was that you shouldn't use these paints in a wet on wet technique. Well, again, that's almost exclusively how I use watercolor a lot of the time because it's my favorite technique. I use these in wet on wet all the time. You just saw me do it on this little card. So if you see that chatter online, feel free to ignore it. If you have these paints and you've been wondering how to use them, you use them in the way that makes you happy, in the way that you like to use watercolor. It'll work. You'll have a fun time. I have been. And if all of that sounds a little bit feisty coming from me, it probably is, and it's probably linked back to how a couple of art teachers and professors talked to me over the years, or how I heard them talk to other students. And I saw how just one comment from an art teacher, an art professor, or somebody that feels like an authority figure in that area can completely change someone's trajectory with either a piece of art they're making or their entire outlook on art or an art career. And I think that just gives me a lot of fire, and I don't like that kind of negativity and people, I don't know, putting that kind of attitude towards other people in their art practice. So for instance, for years, I didn't use watercolor simply because a teacher told me, I don't think this is the medium for you. Because I struggled with it in the beginning because I was trying to follow the rules of how to use the medium, and I wasn't enjoying the process, and I really struggled through it. And that simple comment turned me off to it for years and years and years until I finally rediscovered it again and started using it my own way and playing with it my own way. And now it's my preferred medium most of the time. So yeah, that's probably where a lot of that fire comes from. And I know I'm not the only person with a story like this. I can't tell you how many times I have heard people tell a similar story, how a simple comment from someone in the art community, likely a teacher or a professor or someone with a bit of authority, said something in a slightly negative or very negative way towards an art student, and it completely changed how that person viewed either their work, their practice, what mediums they use, or whether they even went after art anymore at all. And so I'm just very surprised by how many of us have these same stories, and I want to be the opposite of that for people, especially young people, that want to have more creativity in their life. I want to be encouragement and hope and wonder and joy, and not a source of you can't do this, because yes, you absolutely can. Alright, so back to talking about the actual art happening on the desk in front of us here. At this point, I kind of stopped working with the watercolor and I switched over to some of like the pens and the paint pens from the Journal Say box just to see what they did and what they were capable of. It definitely took this tiny little painting to a place I wasn't super happy with at this point because it kind of got too chaotic. But I did like this highlight white acrylic style marker that I was using. That was kind of fun to use. And then I tried using some of the other little pens. And like I said, it just kind of got a little bit messy in there. And I liked it when I had just done the watercolor, the semi-abstract flowers. The other thing I did off camera was I played with some of the other supplies to try to decide if I was going to use them in more of my artwork this day or if I was going to save them for coloring. So these things I ended up saving for coloring at another time. So for a future color along, you'll see these supplies come out. This circle stencil and these pan pastels and the brush that I bought worked so nicely, and I loved the effect. So I made first a big kind of circle with it up in the corner you see, and then I used the stencil to make those smaller star or bubble-like textures, and that brush did exactly what I was hoping it would. I liked how this turned out, and I'm excited to try this on a coloring page in the future. And on the left of this page, you saw where I just kind of swatched out those other pens that I got from Journal Say. And I love the colors. That silver pen turned out really pretty. That came in the same pack with that highlight white that I was just using. So I just wanted to show you guys how I used those supplies. And I'm excited to use them in future art videos, so you can keep your eye out for those as well. Alright, it was time to do another little mini painting. You'll see on the left, I started sketching out in the little strawberry sketchbook what I wanted to do for the day, but I still needed another confidence boost. That inner voice was still being too critical. So I needed to tell her like, hey, thanks for trying to protect me, but I'm okay. I do know how to paint. Nothing bad is going to happen to me. I need to show up here and make this art. And so I made a little crystal on another one of these little trading cards, and I had a lot of fun doing it, and it really helped my attitude. If you would like to make one of these as well, all I did was I took one of my watercolor pencils, which is my preferred way to sketch on watercolor paper. I don't like using a regular pencil that's gonna leave like the gray lines behind. I love using a watercolor pencil because it will melt away into my painting, so to speak. So I used a light blue watercolor pencil, and I drew out my crystal shape. And then I didn't have a whole lot of plan as far as the colors. I just wanted to drop in fun things that inspired me and made me happy. So it was a mixture of some of my Daniel Smith watercolor with these Gonzai paints. Now, I could have done myself a favor by cleaning out my watercolor palette over there on the left, and I would have had an easier time blending colors and making fun colors, but I just didn't have it in me. So I used that mess of a palette on the left and whatever was in there from the last time I painted, which I couldn't even tell you when that was, mixed with these Gonzai paints. And I just started filling in the little sections on the crystal, and I left a white gap in between each section to kind of be that shiny bit or edge of the crystal. And I ended up really liking this. This was really fun, and I think painting several more of these on these little cards could be a really good way to start an art practice each time I sit down to paint, or if I just need a time to turn off the mean voices inside my head telling me you don't know what you're doing. So I highly encourage you to try something like this. Find something that's really fun to paint, make a couple of small cards, and before you sit down to start something larger, make something little that has less pressure attached to it and less expectation. And this doesn't have to be about just painting. You can apply the same idea towards coloring, or pretty much any creative practice. Do something small first, something that doesn't need to have any expectation for the final outcome, and work your way up to the bigger piece. So for coloring, inside all of my books that I illustrate, I always have those practice sheets at the front that you can do a small little coloring when you sit down first to get warmed up before you jump into your larger page. Or go pick a page in the book that you're not really excited about anyway and weren't ever planning to color. Color something little on that page and warm up those creative muscles and quiet the inner critic in you. Sometimes when we sit down to create, we're just faced with so much friction, and so I'm just enjoying finding ways to lessen some of that friction. And speaking of coloring and creative friction, I have something that I'm putting together right now, and I'm just gonna hint at it and give you an idea of what's coming so some of you can prepare. I am building a massive bundle of all of my coloring book downloads and coloring bookmark page downloads, and I'm putting it all together in one big bundle along with a couple of little fun bonuses. And I'm going to sell it as one big thing, but at a very, very, very discounted price for 7 days. And I'm going to start this sale on January 20th, 2026. And it's going to be available for only a very limited time. But it's going to allow everybody that has been, hemming and hawing or on the fence or not sure which thing to pick, it's going to allow you to just get everything all at once, all in one nice, cozy little bundle, easy to find. You don't have to make any choices because it's all right there. And so when you need something creative to do on these long winter nights, then you have tons of creative coloring pages right at your fingertips. So January 20th, keep your eye out. If you are not signed up for my email newsletter yet, it might be a very good time to get on that newsletter. If you just go to my website and you go to the Owl Post Club or the Contact Me, you can sign up in multiple ways. It's also below this video. I'll have the link to sign up to hear from me directly through my email list, and that's called the Owl Post Club. So they will be the first people to know about this bundle. I'll email first as soon as it goes live, and I'll remind everyone on that email list at least 2 times that week while this is available to go ahead and grab that bundle and treat yourself to so many coloring pages that will fill your year. You can have a much more creative 2026 when you grab all of these coloring pages, and then you can come color them with me on this same channel right here. I have so many color alongs building up on this channel, and you can either color the pages that speak to you while I'm coloring in these videos, or you can follow the same exact pages that I'm doing. So anyway, I'm very excited about this. I've been wanting to do something like this for a very long time, and it was time. So you'll be able to get, I think I have 6 coloring books now, the full books in one big download. All of those books plus my bookmarks plus some bonuses. So I think it's going to be a really big treat, and I'm excited to share it with all of you. If you have any questions about it, you can ask me below or email me anytime. But yeah, January 20th. So that bundle is going to be available on my Shopify store only. I'm not going to put it on Etsy. So that link will be available obviously on all of my social media channels and the email lists. But that's just another fun thing I wanted to bring up. I don't think I've mentioned it on YouTube yet because this is my first video of the year. I spent several weeks building a Shopify store. So that's where I'm going to start directing people from now on. I'm not going to be promoting my Etsy as much, and I moved off of the Squarespace shopping site that I had. I still have my Squarespace, but the Squarespace commerce was, or e-commerce was really difficult for me to use because of the amount of types of products and things I had. It just was very difficult for me. So I decided to take the leap and I moved my entire shop over to Shopify, and it looks so cute and cozy now. So if you go to the swimmingowlshop.com, it takes you right to my full shop. It's got almost all of my goodies in there now. I'm still adding things and will continue to add things all year long, along with fun, surprise launches and things here and there throughout the year. But it just feels so good to have that home for all of my artwork now. It's really fun to shop around on that site. And there are things on that site that I don't have on Etsy, and I'm going to probably move a lot of my original artworks and things off of Etsy over to this Shopify store. I'm also going to have a lot of the items that I have in my physical store here in Crystal Falls, Michigan. I'm going to move a lot of those items as well onto the Shopify site. So it's just going to be one big home for lots of cozy, joyful, wonder-filled art. So yeah, if you'd like to check that out, I'd appreciate that too. And for those of you that have already gone to that site and made orders, I appreciate you so much. It has really given me a confidence boost and made me feel like I did the right thing. And it's just, yeah, it felt like such a good move to get it all in one organized location. But I will say, learning Shopify was no easy thing. So for those of you that have done it as well, massive high five to you. That is a very tricky thing to learn. I'm still figuring it all out. All right, so after adding on my little white gel pen details to this crystal, it is done, and I'm going to set this to the side and finally jump into my actual sketchbook painting here of just kind of a little wonderland scene with a rock stack in the bottom. And I'm going to be using mostly my Gonzai paints for this. And so now we're kind of jumping back in time, and I'm just going to show you making my sketch. So I'm using, this is a Staedtler watercolor pencil. These were not out of my journal say box. These are my beloved watercolor pencils. And so I'm just going to sketch out an idea here. And I was also testing out this paper to see what I could get away with. And I was very, very pleasantly surprised that it worked as well as my other watercolor sketchbooks. I was able to erase away some of this watercolor pencil when I decided to move my moon from the right over to the left side of my page. And it just worked really nicely. It is very textured, which I love and prefer. If you do not like super textured watercolor paper, this is not the sketchbook for you, but for me, this is perfect. I love, love, love some paper texture. And we are ready to start painting. So I had a couple of people ask me to go back to making some watercolor videos for this channel again, which I was so happy to see. This is, like I said, one of my very first loves. I love doing sketchbook videos. They didn't seem to be as popular as the color alongs, so I kind of let that guide me, and I did mostly color alongs all last year, but I'm very happy to get back into sharing some sketchbook videos too, here and there, or watercolor painting or other things as well. Hopefully you guys are all okay with me sharing those things too, and you're open to a broader range of videos from me, because this channel really is kind of morphing into more about my life as an artist, not just coloring alone, but how I make the artwork that I make, sketchbooking for fun and joy, coloring for fun and joy, sharing updates about the little shop and studio I opened up in my town called the Owl's Nest Studio. So hopefully everybody's okay with this year having a little bit more variety in the type of video from me. Okay, so enough about that. Let's talk about this actual art making. So my favorite way to work with watercolor is using the wet on wet technique, meaning you put clean, clear water down into a section of your paper, and then you drop watercolor into that wet area. And typically the watercolor you're putting in is also wet and juicy, like you've made a puddle of it in either a palette or your actual paint pans, I should say. So that's my favorite way to work, because it's just so playful, and you can't always predict the outcome, which forces you into experimenting more, playing more, and being more open-minded. And I just love that. I love letting the colors play and blend on the paper themselves and not forcing it too much. That's just my favorite way to work. So you will see in this sketchbook piece today that I do pretty much entirely a wet on wet approach here. And to really test these Ganzai paints, I used, I'd say 95% of the paint I used were the Ganzai paints. I don't think I really mixed too much of that messy paint over on the left a whole lot. Even the puddles you see me grab from in that palette are mostly Ganzai paints that I'd put in there. So I just really wanted to test the limits here with my wet on wet technique, and it worked as well as I could have wanted it to, especially in a little sketchbook piece like this. So yeah, those are kind of, I think, the main things to tell you about my approach to this little painting for today. If at any point you have questions about my process, how I do things, why I do things, you can always ask me below. And right now my channel is small enough that I can answer everyone. So take advantage of that and ask me anything you want to know about my process or my supplies. I love to talk all of that artsy stuff with you. As for my color palette for this piece, I didn't really do any planning, and I probably could have benefited from a little bit more planning, but I think it turned out okay. It was a little bit more muted than my normal watercolor work, and probably one of the reasons was I kept adding the white that's in these Ganzai paints to, see right there, I just added some of the white that's in the palette. Not white in my watercolor palette on the left. There's an actual pan of white paint in the Ganzai paints that I added to most of my colors to put into this. I wanted to make it more soft and pastel, because that's another thing you'll learn about me if you haven't already, is I love a pastel watercolor. And so I kind of created my own pastels with this Ganzai set by adding their white paint into most of the colors as I was working. But I didn't plan out my colors very well. So that is typically something I do a little bit better, is I kind of set a palette for myself at the beginning of, I'm going to stick with these main colors and then maybe add one or two surprise ones in there. I didn't do that this time. I kind of just let it go, and I was much more free with my choices. And now here I'm dropping in a little bit more of a deeper blue from the paint set. And I love adding darkness to the corners of my paintings. It feels like it pulls you in to the painting, kind of like giving you a hug from the outside and pulling you into it. And then I also like to tap in a little bit of darkness into other areas to add contrast. But if it becomes too much, you take a barely damp brush and you just work that color around just a little bit more, and you can soften it. So again, I cleaned the brush off, so there's not paint on there. It was just a little bit of water. And to get it to that working consistency in your brush, you clean it off in your clean water, then you tap it onto your paper towel or cloth to release most of the water so that there's just a little bit left in your brush. And you use that to create all kinds of effects. You can use that to soften a color. You can use it to lift color. And when I say lift, I mean kind of like scrubbing away or erasing away a little bit of color. So you would take your barely damp brush and wipe it or pull it over a spot, and you can pull away color and create a lighter, more translucent spot on your page. Because I work in a wet on wet style, I will work in sections that are not touching each other until one dries if I'm not using my hair dryer. So you'll see now I've jumped down to the bottom of my page to fill in that bottom hill. Unfortunately, my camera cut out on the left side, so we don't have footage of that, but it was really just me making kind of a peachy color by mixing a bit of a pink, a yellow, and the white from the paint palette. And so I don't want to work on a spot that's touching the sky right now because the sky is still damp. And if I were to do that, my colors would bleed into one another. So to keep them separate, I move to a section that's not touching the still wet part. So that would be the bottom hill. And so then what you could jump to next, for instance, while the bottom hill is drying, I could jump up and work on the moon. Or you just whip out a hairdryer and you dry the section that you need to work next to next, which I believe is what I'm going to do. I don't end up doing the moon next. I get the hairdryer out so that way I can work on those middle hills and the pathway. I think I mentioned this earlier, but just in case I didn't or that has slipped the mind by now, one of the reasons my style works the way it does is because I use cold press paper. So 100% cotton cold press watercolor paper. And it stays wet for longer and it allows me to play longer in these areas. So because it's holding the water longer, the paint still can move for a longer amount of time. I can add more color. I can add more saturation, tap in more color, because of the kind of paper this is. If I were using hot press paper, I would be having a much harder time achieving the kinds of effects that I like when I am painting with watercolor and mixed media. So if you're wondering like why you can't seem to get wet on wet to work well for you, check out your paper type. Is it because you're using hot press paper? Because when I tried hot press paper recently, I tried to give it another go. I've used it in the past before too, but recently I tried again just to see if I was just, needing to experiment more. I really struggled to get the kinds of effects that I love because the paper was just too smooth. The watercolor was drying very strangely. So yeah, if you like this kind of style and you have struggled to make it work on your hot press paper, give cold press paper a try. The texture is a little bit something that might take time to get used to if you're not used to all of those bumps and the rough texture that cold press paper is, but I've grown to love it. I've grown to love the look that it gives my artwork. I think we should also take a moment to just kind of giggle at me and my stubbornness to not clean out that watercolor palette on the left. So I keep using that tiny sliver of a spot that was open. Like, why was I being so stubborn? I could have just cleaned out a couple of spots in that palette and had much more room to mix, but I guess I just really didn't have it in me this day. The other thing that I really, really, really need to do is clean out and reorganize or reset up my massive watercolor tin. Most of you have probably seen it in my past videos. All last year, I said I was going to do it. I said I was going to take everything out, clean it out, and reset it up, make a new swatch sheet for where all of the colors are, and I never did it. It feels really daunting to me for some reason, but I know it would really help my art practice and to feel more organized if I would just do it. But it just feels like such a massive task, like a big mountain in front of me, and I don't know why. But I said I was going to do it. I even said I was going to do it in like a live video at one point, and I didn't, but I still need to. If that's something you guys would be interested in seeing in a video sometime, let me know. So right here, you're actually seeing me put more color over the top of my sky, even though it's completely dry. So the sky area has totally dried, but I'm coming back with like a sort of glaze of watercolor back over the top to add in more saturation and color. And to soften the edges, again, we just use a barely damp brush to kind of feather out or fade out that color into the surrounding area. Works really nicely. It's a way to build up more color, add another layer of vibrancy over a base layer. You can absolutely add watercolor on top of watercolor. For these two top hills, or mountains, whatever you want to call them, I decided to go with kind of a peach colored top and a purple shadowy bottom part of the mountain to help them differentiate between the different hills or mountains. So light on top, dark on the bottom of it. It helps it pop against, the mountain or hill in front of it. You saw me first put down that really dark purple at the bottom, and that can feel scary with watercolor sometimes, but again, you just clean your brush off and you fade it upwards with a little bit more water in your brush, barely damp brush, you pull it and fade it up. And then here I added a little bit of blue to the corner to add even more color in there. And now I'm going to start working on the pathway, and you'll notice this pathway change at one point. I kind of painted it in one way and realized I did not like the layout or the composition of it, so I took a barely damp brush, scrubbed it all away, let it dry, and start over. So that's another fun tip for you. You can absolutely correct mistakes with watercolor. You're not stuck. You can take your barely damp brush or even a Q-tip with a bit of water on it, and you can scrub things away, lift the paint away, which works really nicely again on cold press paper. So I think here, maybe I cut this part out. You can kind of see where the path was. I cleaned it up, and now I'm covering it back up with new color, and when that dries, I'll paint in a new pathway. right, so in just a second here, you're gonna see me start to put in that new pathway, but what you didn't see me do was take my hair dryer to this page and completely dry it off first. If I had tried to put this path down after just finishing that hill of color, the path would have bled out into the rest of the hill and mixed in and created kind of a muddy color. So anytime you're like, how is she already painting on this section again? Chances are I took a second to dry it off with a blow dryer before painting over the top of it. The only time you want to keep working in your wet on wet section is if you do want the colors to blend and mix or create blurry edges. If you don't, you need to let it dry completely before coming back over with any details or pathways or rock or any of that. I have to let it dry before I put those things in. To be fully honest, I'm still not 100% happy with how this path turned out. I should have done more planning, but you know what? This painting served its purpose, and that was to get me going again. I'm not sure why I have been dealing with just feeling unmotivated at the beginning of this year or just feeling a little down. This painting got me started again. It put another painting under my belt, so to speak, of showing me like, hey, you can do this, get back in here, come on girl, create your art. This is something that's good for you, makes you feel better. And so it's okay to still not be happy with it, but to also be proud that I showed up and did it, even when it felt uncomfortable at first. For the color of these rocks, this rock stack or cairn down here in the bottom, I knew I wanted to use that beloved periwinkle color that's in these Gonzai paints. Unfortunately, you can't see it on screen right now, but it's my favorite color out of this set. And I knew I wanted to put that into the rocks, but in order to make sure it still felt a part of the scene and not out of place, I mixed in the other colors that I was using in the scene as well. So the purples and the blues and the peaches, I still included those colors in the rocks as well, so that it didn't just feel like something plopped on top of the paper, it felt incorporated into the scene. All right, so right now I'm showing you the perfect example of lifting away color. I cleaned off my brush and tapped on the paper towel to release a lot of the water so that my brush is damp but not soaking wet, and I pulled away some of that purple and blue to make a bit of glow on that side of the rock where the moonlight would be hitting it. All right, and in keeping with what I was explaining earlier, I don't want the rocks to bloom into one another and mix, so I skipped one and worked up on this next rock here, so that way the bottom rock has time to dry. And this color is the periwinkle color I was talking about. Truly one of my favorite colors ever. At least for right now in this part of my life. This is my favorite color to paint with right now. So while I'm finishing up these rocks right now, I'm curious to know what you're working on right now, or are you not working on anything? Maybe you're sitting and sipping on something yummy and just taking in the inspiration, trying to find the inspiration to create again, which I totally relate to, obviously. Or are you painting alongside of me, or coloring, or maybe you're working on your house chores? What are you doing right now while you and I keep each other company? Lately, I've been really loving putting on other artists or creators' videos that are like really nice long videos, like 30 minutes to an hour, and creating alongside of them, or using their videos to help me get inspired to create again. A lot of times just watching someone paint or draw or sketch gives me the itch that I need to go do it too. So I'm hoping that my videos can also be a source of that for you, because I know it helps me. So I have been chatting your beautiful little ears off for like 45 minutes somehow already. So I'm gonna let us sit a little bit more quietly for these last 15 minutes or so. I'll pop in if I see a technique that I really want to point out, but I'll just let us listen to some gentle music for now as I finish off the rocks and the moon and the stars and a little bit of texture work left in this painting. But again, if at any time you have questions, leave them below and I'll get back to you. But for now, well, let's just listen to the music and I'll pop back in at the end for sure to chat just a little bit more. Alright, so I've picked back up some of my white paint pens, and I'll get out my Copic white and some of that white from the Gonzai paints, and I'm just going to tap in some highlights and some stars and some fun little details to finish this off. And like I said, this definitely turned out much more muted or pale than my normal work, but it was a good start. I am proud of me for showing up to make something and getting our year off to another creative start. It was a good first step, and I'm excited to make more art with you this year. I hope that you'll join me. If you enjoyed hanging out with me for a creative hour today, please make sure you subscribe and you hit that like button below and leave me a comment to say hello. Or if you feel shy, even just a little emoji to let me know you were here. I'd appreciate it so much. It really helps me, helps my channel grow so that I can continue to make these videos and make this possible for my business. I appreciate you. I am so happy to have you here. You are welcome here, and I am wishing you such a creative, fulfilling year. I hope that you are able to make lots of colorful, joyful art this year. And if you do it with me alongside of you, even better. Alright, so this cutie is all done. I'm going to peel the tape, and then now I'm going to go ahead and add a date to the corner with this cute little date stamper from Journal Say. It worked out really nicely. And this painting is all done. The first sketchbook piece for 2026, all done. Felt good to make a piece of art again. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey, and I can't wait to see you in the next art making video very soon.